There's been a lot of talk of cultural appropriation in the last few years, namely from the source that the idea that white people have never created anything that we don't have our own culture, when the exact opposite is actually true. It's your buddy Moo Juice Magic here, and history speaks for itself for the most part, but that never seems to get into the thick skulls of some people. And it's starting to really wear thin on everyone in the entire world and every culture in the world. I mean, you're hearing stories that the first English and Irish were black, which is absurd on a level that it just is markedly weird. But now there's a new one that's going around, and it's Muslims wanting to rewrite history even further than they already have. They've already started to see lies in textbooks now at schools that Muslims invented chess, which is absurd. Chess existed over 1,000 years before Islam was even in existence. Christianity was 600 years before Islam, or Muslims were a thing. So I don't know where they're getting these ideas or why they're deciding this is their time to shine when they could just own that they are who they are. But instead, they want to take the culture of everyone else. But no one seems to be complaining about that until now. They pushed a line they shouldn't have crossed. And that line is when you fuck with Vikings, they get a little uptight. Scandinavians are really proud of their heritage. Even though, I mean, they don't even shy away from the fact that the Vikings were these pillaging, rappy, not so nice people. No, they own that. They own that, and they take it to heart, and they love every minute of it. And this fellow here is a really bright guy. He's, I believe, a historian on Viking culture. And let's hear what he has to say, because he is none too pleased with some current claims that have been going around that are just fucking absurd.
So apparently the Vikings were Muslim. Yeah, that's the claim. They were Muslim. It is the lie that will not die. I will talk a little bit about where that whole idea comes from, and I will also tell you about that time when I was approached by some very Muslim investors because they had some ideas about how I could rewrite Viking history for them. So the Norse, they had a lot of contact with people from other parts of the world.
Very
and they
true.
traded, and they went exploring and raiding. And for instance, we know that they traded with people from what would have been the Abbasid Caliphate, so the Muslim world. And they brought home artifacts.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for just a second, guys. Just a second. On a side note there, or I think he's going to get to this. I watched a few seconds of this video. I've seen a couple other videos this guy's done. And he's a really I think his name is, I should probably know his name before I do this. I think it's Bjorn something. But that's the most Viking name I could come up with, guys. That or Gingve, give me a break. But you get this idea that Vikings traveled everywhere. They had touch with a lot of different cultures and communities, and they would bring things home with them. That's just what they did. They pillaged, they traded. They didn't just steal. They didn't just break into monasteries and take the caches from there. But they did actually trade with people along the way. And you would see like Tartars, and you would see, the Persians and the other Arab countries coming together in the Caliphate, as he's mentioning here. And they would all intertwine, and they would get along at that point because they had a mutual need. They would need passageways and map sharing, things like that, to the point where, you hear about the traveler. I can't remember his name, is a Persian guy, an Arab guy, and he would actually travel up north into Viking territory occasionally as well. And he would just travel all over the world and gathering different spices and things and bring it back to the Caliph and things like that. So it's really interesting stuff. They got around a lot. They traveled a lot. The Arabs traveled a lot. Even a lot of Asians traveled a lot. And not so much the Japanese. The Japanese were really secluded on their island, but there were a lot of other trading going on.
And one of those artifacts was a ring that was found in a grave at Birka in Sweden, a Norse settlement. And if you read about that, it will probably say that archaeologist Hjalmar Stolpe, he excavated that grave and he found a ring, I believe. It needs to be said that he was not an archaeologist. He was interested in insects, and he tried to find insects in amber, like very old insects that had been captured in amber. But that's beside the point, maybe. So that ring, it says "For Allah" on it. It's a ring with it looks like a gemstone, but it's actually glass, which was very precious back then. And it says "For Allah." There have been some claims that some of the patterns on Viking garments, that this part here, the ribbons, they have found some that says Allah or something like that. That has been what do you call it? Refuted. That's just a coincidence.
So I don't know if he meant to use the word coincidence, maybe he did, but refuted meaning it's been proven that it wasn't something that was a commonality. If it happened, it would have been a one-off, maybe as a gift to someone they were trading with, things like that. They would trade back and forth, all these things. They'd give gifts, things like that. The Vikings didn't just take. That is a contrarian understanding of facts. So you got to keep that in mind. We need to actually study history on an occasion, guys. And world history is important too. American history is going to be number one most important to any, should be number one most important to any of us, but we need to know world history to understand how America came to be. What he's saying is a good point here. That ring was found in a gravesite. There's all this stuff being moved around, transported back and forth, traded thither and thither. And you think about like archaeologists in the future coming to the Americas, coming to North America, especially the U.S., as this cultural melting pot, and seeing this diverse amount of things from all over the different cultures of the world. What are these archaeologists 1,000 years in the future going to think? Is the assumption going to be that this society was the hinge pin of all other societies? Because we tend to do that with Egypt, the idea of Atlantis. We make these things the cornerstone idea versus something else like travel and trade. We completely ignore the possibility of that for a simpler, more fanciful, idea and notion. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that archaeology and that the new archaeology both get really confused, because they're both trying to treat civilizations like the cradle of something instead of a melting pot. They never want to look into that possibility. In this situation, we know exactly where that ring came from as pertaining to be ending up in Sweden. It came from trading. Glass was not something that you would see a lot of. It looked like that ring was made of glass. He said it. It said glass was really big in the Middle East. And it wasn't something you're going to see a lot of made in Scandinavia. So maybe we look at it that way instead of trying to go, oh, well, this is how it is now. The Vikings must have been Muslims, which is fucking preposterous. It's like saying that Vikings were mostly Christians. It's ridiculous. They were raiding monasteries. They didn't have crosses hanging around because they were worshiping Jesus all the time. There were some Christian churches established in Viking territory at some points in time. Absolutely. We know that's true. Joseph of Arimathea traveled up north and spent time with the Nords. We don't know exactly what part. We know that a Christian church house was established in somewhere in one of the Scandinavian regions, something like 600 years or like a few hundred years before Muslims existed, before the Quran, before the story of Muhammad and all of that. So when you look back at history, it's a really interesting painting. But when you think about the conglomeration of peoples, that's when you really got to start wondering, okay, well, how much more trading was going on than we're aware of? And we tend to not look at that. Well, in this case, we have to look at that because we know Vikings were traveling all over the damn place. They were in North America at times when there was no natives here. So I don't know what else to tell you guys. Our understanding of history is kind of bleak at this point.
Should this? you live in Scandinavia during the Viking Age, and your friend, your mate Halfdan, he comes back from a trip to England, and he brings home a silver cross, and he shows it to all his mates.
Oh, there we go.
Would you assume that Halfdan had become a Christian, or that he had been raiding a monastery? I would kind of assume that he didn't care about Christianity at all.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Found some silver. Okay. And we need
to
kind of keep that idea in mind when these people are trying to make us believe that just because you found this ring at Birka and it says for Allah, that some of the Vikings were Muslims. It's very unlikely. It needs to be said, of course, that the Norse, they were converted to Christianity towards the end of the Viking Age through force and through, I guess you could say, politics. But they did not convert to Islam. That's just a ridiculous idea.
Yeah.
However, probably someone traveled and stayed in a Muslim country, and out of convenience, when he was asked if he was a Muslim, he would just say yes. Maybe that happened. Who knows? But the idea that you would have Muslim Vikings, it's ridiculous, and it's one of these things that people these days, they just want to be true, and they kind of attach it to the past. They put politics into the past. Oh, look at how diverse the Vikings were and all of that. We've seen it before with the Black Vikings thing that I made a video about, and it's a lie. It's a lie, and it's obvious why these people are trying to make people believe in these lies. It's ideology, it's politics, and those things should be kept far away from history.
Okay, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to leave it at that because he's absolutely right. I will link this video. I want you guys to go back and watch his whole video. But he's got 100% legitimate points here. And that's what it boils down to, is they are trying to do the opposite of whitewashing all of history anymore. I don't know who they are specifically, but there's a large swath of people that seem to want to take white anything out of everything. White, Christianity, pagan beliefs. They want to take anything that was pretty much a white thing and just convert it to something that it wasn't, for the sake of inclusivity, for storylining. You see Disney do this all the time with their shit movies these days, where everything has to be blackwashed, or you have to have a lesbian in there, or a gay guy, or a tranny, or some other shit. You have to have something like that. There has to be diversity. You can't just have any historical facts anymore. And this is not new to Hollywood. This kind of shit's been going on forever. Storytelling in general. And that's fine to a degree. But when you start completely eradicating truth and replacing it with bullshit, it becomes a serious issue, like Black Vikings, like Black Irishmen. The term Black Irish comes from Irish with really dark hair and darker skin. It has nothing to do with black people at all. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the Irish came up from Spain, or came over from Spain in areas like that originally. So it's not just like they were there in Ireland at the inception of time living in aboriginal caves and were black tribal people that eventually got lighter skinned. That's not how things work. That is not at all how things work. It doesn't even make any sense fucking at all. It's like thinking that all the people that came out of Africa must have been black. That's also stupid. That's an incredibly ignorant way to think about history. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with black people. Black people are awesome, especially black women. Oh, yeah, let me some chocolate. And, whipped cream on top of chocolate. It works out really well. Cup of cocoa. My jungle fever's kicking in, folks. Give me a break, okay? Black women are gorgeous, usually. So moving along, though, that's not to say that there couldn't have been people that maybe there were some Vikings, like he had mentioned, that went down and stayed that way or got like stuck over there and just for the sake of being there, assimilated into society. Because that's what you do when you go to someone else's society and decide to live there. You assimilate to that society. I know it seems weird because it doesn't happen in America anymore for some fucking reason. When we should be, if you come here, you should be assimilating into American culture and society, absolutely. Our society is built in a way where you can still maintain a chunk of what your society was like as long as it doesn't impede and infringe upon everyone else's already existence. Unfortunately, that's what's been going on in America for a while, and in England now, and in Ireland, and in Germany, and this is becoming a big problem. England isn't English anymore. It is Muslim. That is the Middle East. It has become the Middle East. You got roaming bands of dudes with machetes walking around. This is not to bring any hate towards Arab people, because there's some wonderful Arab people out there. There's some wonderful Muslims out there. The problem is the ones that aren't are very violent or very, very dead set on eradicating your history if you are not one of them. It has nothing to do with your skin color. It has everything to do with their ideology, as he said. Ideology is a huge problem. A lot of people pushing these beliefs too. It's not like it's a lot of black people pushing the idea that there were black Vikings. It's a bunch of white people pushing this stupidity. That's what's really crazy about it. Could there have been black people in Scandinavia living in like small sects of tribes, like if you say like the Neanderthalic people that might have the 13th warrior broached that idea, that topic in that story, that it was obviously a work of fiction. Michael Crichton added it on to add to Ibn Rashid, the traveler, as I had mentioned earlier, to his story. It was like an additional writing to that as a kind of a little fun project that Michael Crichton did in Eaters of the Dead. And it became the 13th warrior with Antonio Banderas playing a Persian, Arab Persian, which is kind of odd. But nonetheless, they had the idea that these cave-dwelling, Neanderthalic people were living in Scandinavia. Well, I think that wasn't Scandinavia. That would have been parts of like northern England area, the British Isles, when the Viking incursions were going that way and the Vikings were moving into the English areas. So you never really know. There could have been these small groups of people that had lived there undetected for a long period of time, but Vikings weren't black people. Irish weren't black people. The Vikings weren't Muslims. They did convert to Christianity many, many, many years ago. And, it was a slow growth at first, and some went fine and the others went not so fine with, violent incursions and things like that from the church, which I don't agree with. I don't think that's the appropriate way to do things. But nonetheless, that's what happened. Anyway, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, and we're in a repetition cycle right about now because people didn't study anything ever at all anymore. Muslims didn't invent chess. Muslims didn't come up with the idea of medicine. Muslims did not have the greatest libraries in the world. They stole them, and that is historical fact. And then they burnt the evidence, and they destroyed the evidence when it didn't match their bill. That's just all there is to it, guys. I'm sorry, but that's exactly what happened. You look at Iran, you look at Iraq, and you had all these great archaeological discoveries, and as soon as the bad part of Islam came in the area, the first thing they do is they destroy anything that doesn't match what they want you to believe. And that makes it really difficult to find the truth. And that's why they do it. And then they plunge their stories in like a knife into the heart of facts and history. I'm your buddy Moo Juice into Magic. I'm your buddy Moo Juice Magic. I love you in the face. So learn your history, guys. It's life-saving. Have a good one, guys.